lighting and how it reaches your reef. I've drawn a preliminary sketch here of the arc of, let's just say, the sun moving across the sky over a reef. And I'm going to say in nature, but really we care about what's going on in our aquariums. Now, when the sun first starts, it starts over here, and it starts traveling across its arc, the distance to the reef is much farther than it is when it's directly overhead. Just like in the morning, you get up, you have your coffee, the sun is coming out, the sky is getting brighter, but it's not really warming up yet. And then as the sun moves closer and closer to this point, it becomes more of a direct light, and it's more powerful. So the reef would be getting more light at that point. And as it moves across high noon, this is the area where there'd be the most intensity over a normal reef. And so when we light our tanks, if you light full strength, or even if you just give it an hour of actinic and then you go bam, full strength, you're actually doing basically damage. It's not really helping your corals. Instead, they need to feel like the sun is traveling over their reef, over themselves. So as the sun is moving across, you have this area here that should maybe be 3 hours worth or 4 hours worth where it's pretty intense. And then it tapers off as it goes back down until the sun is over here towards sunset. So that's basically the point I want to make. Now here's my reef, and here are the back doors where the sunlight comes in the morning. So this section of my reef, let's just cut it into thirds. This section gets some sunlight first through the doors, but not directly on the glass. It's just light comes in. This end is quite a bit darker because it's further away from the light source. And then my first metal halide will turn on, and then my second metal halide will turn on after a while, like an hour and a half later. And then finally, the third one will turn on again another hour and a half later. So what's happening here is that sections of the reef are being lit up gradually, and then as the day progresses, this one turns off, and then this one turns off, and then finally, this is the only part that's lit up, because remember, this is all dark outside, and then finally this turns off as well, and what's left is some actinics, and then the reef goes to sleep for the night. So I hope this will help explain why I make the light move across my reef with staggered lighting. This handy slide will be something you can hit pause on during the video to read it carefully, but basically explains my photo period of each light that I use over the tank. The key point I want to point out is that we also let the reef rest at night with the lights off completely and let everything slumber. Using handy-dandy time-lapse photography, we can see how this lights switch from VHOs only to the very first metal halide. It's turning on the right side of my reef, and it's in 10K mode. Let me adjust the lighting intensity so it looks a little more normal. So for the first hour or so, I have one metal halide bulb on. And then after about that much time has passed, a second light comes on, and we're going to see that here. And then after another hour, the third one will come on. But also, I have set up my timers on the apex to switch it from 10K mode to 20K mode. So you'll see a change on the right where it's going to be a little more blue in a moment. And here we go. Now the middle is still 10K. The right side is 20K. And that's just because the first hour has elapsed already, long before the third bulb finally turns on in the staggered lighting schedule. I have to say, you guys have started to brainwash me with all these crazy blue tanks. I've always loved the look of daylight lighting, and I used to have my tank run for about 3 hours in white lighting only, and then after another 3 hours in blue, but now I've cut it way down to an hour and a half of white and 4.5 hours of blue each day. That's crazy, but I do understand it. The corals are so much prettier to look at. I just feel that it's important to have some daylight for some speedier growth. Now as you look at the tank, you'll notice that the two bulbs, the right and the middle, are blue, and the bulb on the left is in the 10K mode still. And then by around 4:30 in the afternoon, the entire tank has turned 20,000 Kelvin blue. Now when I was filming this, I was also busy preparing orders for customers, so you may see me floating around in these images doing things like building boxes. You can also on the far right kind of see the edge of the 60-gallon anemone cube, which is lit with a radion light, which is LEDs. One thing I need to discuss, because I mentioned earlier in this video about intensity and being able to control how much light is going onto your tank at any given time. With metal halides, I can't control the intensity. I can't suddenly say I want 60% light or 70% light. No, but what I can do is determine how long I want the light to be lit. So instead of running a long period, I run a shorter period, and that has reduced the intensity that the tank will be hit with light. Here's some normal speed video instead of having these fish move around like the hyperactive. I really do enjoy looking at my reef daily. This is the room I work in, so it's to my right, and I can always look over and see how things are doing. And now the bulb on the right is about to turn off. Do the power of editing. And you can see that the reef is now being lit with the middle metal halide and the left metal halide only, as well as the VHOs that give some glow over the area that wouldn't have a bright light overhead. The refugium came on during the afternoon. I don't run it reverse cycle because I like my house dark at night. When I get my woodwork done, I will then go ahead and change it to nighttime only and light it for about 8-9 hours per day. So the middle has turned off, and now we're down with a left light only, which means we're wrapping up the evening. This is the time when I feed the reef before that final light turns off, because after that there's 30 minutes left of blue lighting from the VHOs, and then at that point it's going to switch over to moonlighting for one final hour. Time-lapse photography is kind of fun. Here we go, we're about to hit moonlighting, and very hard for the camera to pick it up because the refugium is so bright. But it's just a dim glow for 1 hour. It kind of lets everyone settle in to where they're going to sleep for the night, and then after that it's pitch dark and everything can rest. This is the metal halide bulb I use over my reef. I have 3 400-watt bulbs. They're called twin arc because they have 2 different arcs within the outer glass shield. There's a 10,000 Kelvin bulb as well as a 20,000 Kelvin. And using my apex, I can trigger them to turn on and off. Now I bought the matching ballast to go with this bulb, so they always trigger correctly every single time. So the first part of the day when the lights come on, you'll see white lighting over my reef because the 10K bulb has come on. The apex then will trigger it on and off, or off and on, within 1 minute flat, and that will switch it from a 10,000 to a 20,000 Kelvin bulb. And then for the rest of the day, the tank will have the blue hue that makes corals look so pretty, but I still get some growth because I'm using the 10,000 Kelvin as the first part of the day of each bulb. So why do I keep using metal halides over my reef when LEDs are the technology of the future? I do have LEDs over the anemone cube, and I also have them over my frag tank, and I have them over my refugium, but I really like the look of my reef under metal halides. I just haven't been convinced that that's the look I want to go with. I'm not really so concerned about the cost of running my metal halides because, yes, they do add some heat to the water, but my heaters are still coming on. If I didn't have any metal halide heat, I would be adding heaters all the time, around the clock, to keep the tank up to the proper temperature. I've also owned the reflectors, so it's not like there's a huge expense for me. Replacing bulbs once a year has never been a factor. It's kind of expected in this hobby. And I know the people that get LEDs tend to keep upgrading, so you don't really save money if you keep replacing the light on a regular basis, as well as running heaters to compete with the fact that you don't have enough heat coming into the water. One of my favorite color modes is this one right now, and it only happens a couple of times a day. It's not all day long. This is actually set up in a progressive lighting period where it will change colors throughout the day. In other words, it'll go from very dim blue to a lighter color, finally into the 10K mode, then back down into deep, and then of course the best color is when it's full moon, where I get about an hour, hour and a half of like a crazy violet blue. It really glows. It's awesome. The whole house is dark, and so it makes this tank really pop. I thought I'd show you a demo of what my 24-hour day looks like. So I'm using the app from EcoSmart Live, and right now it's changing 1 hour every second or so. So right now we're at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, midnight. So basically what you just saw in, I don't know what that was, 30 seconds or so, you saw the entire day progress, which is a pretty cool demo. I don't use lightning patterns or cloud cover. I have it set up to start it, as you saw at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It kicks in and starts glowing, and it ramps up in intensity to a maximum of 80%. With the radiant light intensity set to 80%, that's the maximum the entire fixture will light up my tank. I run the white LEDs between 37% and 55% during the high noon period of the day. The rest of the time, it's ramping up or it's ramping down. And of course, like I mentioned before, I love lunar mode, but lunar mode literally matches the full moon outside, which means when there's a new moon, my tank is dark. When it's a full moon, my tank stays lit for another hour, hour and a half, 2 hours longer, once or twice a month. This is my favorite view of the tank. I get to look at the full length of the Reef, which is 84 inches front to back. I've mentioned that before, but it's mine, so I can say it as often as I like. The point of this video was to help you determine how long your lights should be on. Some people think they should just turn them on for 12 hours a day, and I seriously think that's too long. Others want to have it on in the morning when they leave for work, and they want it on in the evening when they come home, and they want it on late at night after the kids went to bed. It's still too long a day. Running a split lighting period where they're on for a little while, then they turn off, and then they turn on again, and then they turn off, seems kind of abnormal to me, but that may work for you. I would suggest just starting it later in the day. And, use some moonlights for the 1 or 2 hours you're at home in the morning, just to get a little bit of a glow to kind of take a peek at some of those pretty zoanthids and other corals. Then when you come home in the evening, enjoy the tank for what it is. In California, the electricity is so expensive that many hobbyists start their lights at 6 p.m. when the electricity is cheaper and run it to 1 in the morning, which again is 7 hours. I hope you're noticing a pattern that running lights should not be a full duration situation, but that it should fit the Reef and match what's going on. I hope that I answered all your questions. Of course, there may be some things I've omitted or forgotten, so feel free to ask me in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them or direct you to a point where you can learn more. I'll put a link in the video description to my staggered lighting article, in case you'd like to read up more on how that's done, though this pretty much covered it nicely. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for weekly videos as they release, and I'd love it if you'd even share it. That's something I've not asked before. I appreciate any kind of attention that you can give to getting people this information, because other hobbyists need to be taught what's right from what's wrong. I hope that what I've explained to you seems right. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back in a week.